Lesson 5, Variables. So a variable is a placeholder for a piece of information that can change. And variables can have various names you can give them. Um, just usually you want to give it a name that makes sense, something that is related to whatever you're using the value for. So let's go ahead and I'm going to skip the video, but you guys should go ahead and watch that if you haven't already. And we'll move to the first exercise. In this program, the variable exposition is used to store the x-coordinate of the circle. So we've got this, here it says var, so our variable starts out with var, and then we give it the name or the label for the variable, which is called exposition. And then it sets the value to 50, okay? So var exposition gets 50, or it says equals here, which is the sign we use, but typically you'll say var exposition gets 50. So the exposition gets a value of 50. It wants us to run the program, see how it works, so we'll run it. And then we want to change the number that's stored into the variable and run the code again. So right now it's drawing an ellipse with an exposition of 50. Okay, so in our ellipse we have the x value here, the y value, the width, and the height. So the x value will take whatever is set as the exposition here. So if we change this to 100, then what should happen is an x value of 100 would place the center it along this line, and then the y value is 350, so 350 is down here. So it should place the circle right here. And if we change the exposition to 200, it should be drawn in the middle here at the bottom. Okay, let's move to the next one. In which corner of the screen will the circle be drawn? Okay, we've got a variable called exposition, which is equal to 300, or set to 300. Then we've got a variable called what's the y that's set to 100 for the value. So we've got an ellipse here with an x value of exposition variable, which if we come up here and look at the exposition variable, that's 300. So we take this 300, put it in place of here, and that's where it's being drawn for the x value. Then we look here for the y value, and the y value is getting a variable called what's the y. And the what's the y has a value of 100. So this 100 value goes down here for the y position. So essentially when it's drawing the ellipse, it's saying, okay, I need to get this variable, the value of whatever the x position is, and put that as the x. And that value is 300. Then I need to get the value of this variable, what's the y, for the y position, and that's 100. So it should draw an ellipse with an x value of 300 and a y value of 100. So if we run this, so x 300, y 100, somewhere around here, which is right what it did. So let's go ahead and finish and move to the next one. So in exercise 5, this program uses the circle size. So we got a variable, var. Circle size is what they're labeling the variable. Remember, you could give variables different names. Just make sure that when you're calling them or you're using the variable, it matches with the name you give it. So this variable is called circle size with a capital S on size, and it's giving a value of 450. Then we look down here, it's setting the fill to crimson for the color, and then it's using the ellipse command to draw an ellipse with an x value of 200, a y value of 200, so down in the middle, and then the width is going to be whatever value the circle size variable is, which is 400, and then the height is going to be whatever value the circle size variable is, which again is 450. So 450 wide, it'll go off the screen a little bit on both sides, and 450 high. Now because this is a circle and not a rectangle, it's not filling all the way, right? So we've got 450 this way, 450 that way. So if we add to this, if we say call it maybe 600 wide, that'll bring the circle, make the circle even bigger. So it wants us to change the value here of the variable so that this circle will fill the full screen and look like this here. So I've changed it to 600, so every time it comes to the circle size variable, it will put a value of 600 in there. So it'll be 600 wide and 600 high on this one when I run it. And now it's filled the whole screen. All right, for exercise 6, this program has only one variable called petal size. We got var petal size gets 50, and it uses this 8 times. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So because it's using it 8 times, it makes it easy to just change this variable once, and then it updates all these 8 values down here. So what it wants us to do in this one is change the number assigned to the petal size so the red petals touch one another. Let's go ahead and run it. Okay, so the petal size right now is 50. The petals are not touching. So we want to make a size that makes the most sense so that petals can touch each other. Well, let's try maybe 75 and see if that allows them to touch. We'll make it a little bit bigger. That way, each of the ellipses, width and height, will go ahead and grab this value, 75. So the width would be 75, the height would be 75 for all 8 of these, since we've got our petal size variable in there, and our variable is set, the petal size, to 75 for the value. So let's run this. And there we go, we got a flower. Now we could lower it a little bit or make it a little bigger depending on how you like it. Okay, and this page is telling us more about variables and how to use them and how to assign values to them. You can create a variable and then assign value later, or you could initialize the variable, which means you're creating it and assigning it a value at the same time. Okay, so we've got the option, we have 2 blocks of code, one that says var size or whatever the variable name is, and then size equals 100, or you could be written in just one line saying var size equals 100. That initializes it and sets the value, and it creates it at the same time. So let's go ahead and move along to the next exercise 8. This program has multiple errors caused by bad label names. The errors prevent the program from being viewed in block mode, so the code is in text. Okay, so it says try to figure out what the problems with the variable names are causing the errors, and correct the errors by picking new names. If your program works, it should draw the image on the right. So let's just run it before we change anything, and we get some errors here. Okay, it's not working. So if you click here, click the arrow to see a few rules. We've got rules here. Labels or names of variables can't have spaces. Okay, so this variable name or label is called size space of space circle. That's a problem because labels for variables cannot have spaces. So one option we can do is just take out the spaces, or a lot of times in coding we'll use camel case so the next word starts with a capital letter. So let's say size of circle. I'm going to capitalize the O and the C, and then I'm going to look down here anywhere else where I see size of circle and make sure it matches with my variable that I've just changed. Okay, size of circle, we're changing the label or the name of the variable so that it matches. Okay, so we fixed the size of circle problem. Now let's go to the next one. The next rule, labels can't start with a number. We've got a variable here, var, 1 dimension equals 100. Well, it can't start with a number, so we could either get rid of the number altogether, or we could type out the word 1 dimension, however we want to do that. But it can't have a number, so I'm just going to get rid of the 1. And then I'm going to get rid of the 1 here too, so they match. Okay, the third problem we've got here is capitalization and spelling must be exactly the same. Now if we look here, we've got lowercase y, capital L for y location. Now it looks fine for a variable name. Now, sorry, I had to scroll over. So var y location equals 200. Now if we look over here in the code, we've got capital Y, capital L. So the difference is this one's a lowercase y and this one's a capital Y. So let's just make those match. So I've initialized my variable here for y location, and now I'm using the variable. So the variable name that I'm using has to match this exactly with the same uppercase and lowercase letters. So if I reset this and run it, Now I get my circle. It looks like the picture here, and everything's fine. Okay, on lesson or exercise 9, it wants us to debug this some more. And it's telling us variables can be assigned a random number too. So we've got var isize gets random number from 10 to 60. So every time you use this isize variable in the code, it's going to pick a random number from 10 to 60 and put that in its place. So if we look here, if we go ahead and run this to see how the code works, we've got a big eyeball and a little eyeball. If we run it again, we've got a medium size and a little one. And each time we run it, the left eye changes, but the right eye is staying the same. Okay. What it wants us to do now is change the program so both eyes are always the same random size. So both eyes need to be random, but they need to be the same, like in this little picture on the right. So we just need to make changes to one line of code, it says. So if we look down here, we've got our eyes. Okay, the fill color is black. That matches. We've got an ellipse at 160 for the x, 160 for the y, with a width of eye size. And what's eye size now? An eye size is anywhere between 10 and 60. It's a random number. So that's why it's changing. And then we have a height of eye size, which again is that random number from 10 to 60. So your width and height on this eye here is changing. It's a random number, but it changes each time you run it. Now if we look at the other eye, 240, 170, which is right here, this one has a width of 10 and a height of 10. So in order to make the eyes the same and change each time to a random number, we need to use that same variable, which is giving us a random number. Okay, the variable name is eye size. So what we'll do is we'll come back down to our other eye and we'll change the width to eye size. Remember, the spelling is important. If you have a capital, you need to use a capital. So we've got a capital S in size. So I'm going to change the width to whatever eye size is, which is that random number between 10 to 60, and the height to eye size, which is again the random number between 10 and 60. So if I reset it and run it, each time I run it, two eyes are random size, but they match. And that's it for lesson 5. So this tells you a little bit more about rules for naming, and the camel case we talked about a little bit, and tells you can use underscores as well for naming many things. And spaces between words using underscores instead of spaces.